And we're just going to start that. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event today with Sam Taylor, instructional designer and author of the coding workbook, Build a Website with HTML and CSS. Now, the concept of Shout Out Saturday series is about promoting women professionals who want to share their insight into the tech world through overcoming obstacles, highlighting accomplishments, or tech industry advice. So I'll be having a chat today with Sam Taylor on the day in the life of an instructional designer, where we take a glimpse of what an instructional designer does and advice for those who want to switch into instructional design. My name is Dianne Jardinez, and I will be your moderator for this event. So for our agenda today is that we'll have short introductions where we'll be introducing Women Who Code and our speaker today. We'll have questions for Sam Taylor and a chance for you, the audience, to ask your questions, which you can place in the Q&A area of this webinar, somewhere on the bottom of the screen titled Q&A. So please feel free to add questions throughout our time here and we will get to them. So for Women Who Code's mission, Women Who Code's mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And our programs are designed to support women in being and becoming leaders in the industry by providing tools, opportunities, and inspiration to fuel professional success. And we are growing. We've reached more than 120 countries with a network of more than 230,000 technical women. And we have different networks available for you to join in addition to our Silicon Valley chapter. I do want to take this time to discuss our code of conduct. So Women Who Code is an exclusive community. We are dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community. Our events are intended to inspire women in technology careers, and anyone who is there for this purpose is welcome. We don't tolerate harassment of members or event participants in any form. And if you would like to read the full version of our code of conduct, please feel free to visit that link displayed. Now, I want to introduce Sam Taylor as speaker for today. So Sam Taylor, MED, is an instructional designer working in tech in the Bay Area. She started off her career as a middle school STEM teacher, and throughout her 5 years in the classroom, she also taught herself to build out websites for her students. Sam then created a web development blog where she posted simple HTML and CSS tutorials, and all of these experiences combined blossomed into the coding workbook. Sam is passionate about making computer science curriculum available to all students, regardless of access to computers or technology. Thank you again for joining us, Sam, and being a part of our Shout Out Saturday series. We do appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
So Sam, I just wanted to share this with you and with the audience. In computer science or in the tech world per se, there seems to be so many different ways someone could pursue their career in this realm, and such as coding or being in leadership. And I'm just really glad that we could connect and share experience today, where you have this STEM and teaching background, and you have been able to take your knowledge and experience and create this book on HTML and CSS. And coming from someone who has kind of like taken a lot of computer science curriculum from like instructional designers or yourself, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. It's really helpful.
Thank you.
All right, so our theme is all about the day in the life of an instructional designer, and we'll kind of just dive into our first question. So, which is, tell us about your career pathway, Sam, like leading up to your current position as an instructional designer.
Yeah, totally. So kind of as I started my career, I was starting off as a 6th grade science teacher. So I taught for 3 years in Las Vegas. I taught biology and I loved it. And after my 3rd year teaching, I decided to move back to the Bay Area, and I continued working in the classroom. So I was teaching again. But while I was teaching my 4th year, I kind of decided that maybe I wanted to switch into something new and possibly the tech industry. So while I was teaching, I actually decided to teach myself to code just as a way to kind of get some technical skills in case I ever wanted to make the transition. And while I was teaching, I also, I teaching myself to code. And so I started a blog where I wrote tutorials, and I kind of archived and wrote about my experiences as I was learning to code. And it really blossomed into this nice blog of tutorials. I would record videos, I would screen record myself building websites. And yeah, so I was doing that while I was teaching. And as my 4th year of teaching kind of came to an end, I applied to work part-time as a curriculum developer for an ed tech company called Albert.io. And so that was kind of my first step into the tech world, where I was working part-time developing curriculum, still science curriculum, but for a tech company. So I got to kind of learn a little bit about how different processes work. And then, you know, after my 4th year, I really felt confident because I had a portfolio basically of this blog where I would build courses and I would build tutorials. And I decided to start applying as an instructional designer because I felt like it was the perfect marriage of teaching and, you know, creating curriculum, but also working in tech. And so, yeah, I think having that blog and having basically my portfolio at the ready when I was applying for instructional design jobs really helped to kind of propel me into that career. And I've been loving it ever since.
That's really good to hear. So now that you're an instructional designer, what does your typical day look like?
Yeah, so I can start by giving kind of a brief overview of what an instructional designer is, because sometimes people don't quite know that this is a role that you can have in the tech industry. And so basically what I do is I build out customer-facing training for a software company. I can also, you know, as an instructional designer, build out certification programs. So some of the common ones that you might have experienced are, you know, an AWS certification, Salesforce certification. So if you're taking these certifications, you take different classes and you take an exam, and all of that is typically built by an instructional designer. So anytime you are trying to learn a new software and you take a class from that company, that's usually built by an instructional designer. So that's kind of an overview of what an instructional designer is. And now if we look at kind of a day in my life, I can kind of walk you through. I work, you know, 8 to 4:30. And so in the mornings, I start my morning pretty early. I wake up, check Slack. My team is international, so I like to get on Slack pretty early just to kind of make sure that we have a time zone that, you know, we can all interact. I'm also more creative and productive in the morning. So I find that, you know, I can really crank out some content and some courses and some curriculum fairly early. So I start my morning 8:15 until about 8:30, and then I have a morning stand-up. We have a stand-up once a week with my team, and we kind of just talk about what we want to accomplish for the week, what projects we're working on, what courses we're building, or maybe, you know, anything that we're having an issue with, like maybe having some video recording issues, and we can kind of present that. And then around 9:15, you know, I spend the day, or I spend the next 45 minutes to an hour reviewing the content that I wrote the day before, because it's always nice to have fresh eyes on a course that you've been working on the day before. So it could be anything from reviewing old writing or a video that I recorded the day before, just to kind of give myself a new perspective and tweak it if I need to. And then 10 a.m. I take like a breakfast break, and then kind of take, you know, because I'm staring at the screen all day. And then at 10:45, I really get into building my course content. So this is really where I could be writing courses. I can be creating an outline for a small course. I can be, you know, taking screenshots. Because I work in software, I have my own instance of the software. And so I can go in, take screenshots, take screen recordings, maybe mess around with some settings, break things, and then, you know, figure out the best way to teach that and teach people how to do it properly. So I'll spend the next few hours writing, recording, and really just creating. And so that's, where I get to do what I love. And then I'll usually take a lunch break around 12:45 where I go for a walk and I try to get outside. And yeah, from the rest, maybe 1:30 on, I'll have meetings. I will edit my peers' work. I'll have Slack conversations with product teams, because one part of my job is always making sure that as product updates roll out, I'm also creating content that teaches these product updates too. So it's nice that I get to be in the loop with product managers, anyone who's working on a product, because, in software, things change quickly and products update quickly. And so we want to make sure that we're always kind of tracking with what people are building so we can get it out the door. But yeah, that pretty much is my day. I get to create all day. I'm basically get paid to learn and then paid to create trainings for people. And it's just so fun because there's always something new. And, one course could be non-technical for maybe marketers or, designers, but some courses could be for developers. Like, how do they get our software up and running? And, making sure that we're writing for the proper audience. If we're writing more technical content, we write it in a bit differently than if we were to write for, marketers or designers.
Is there a particular course or curriculum that you have a preference for, or is it kind of you like all of the types of?
I really like creating technical curriculum, but I do love that I can kind of bounce back and forth between the two. So, a course will usually take 2 to 3 months. So after you spend 2 to 3 months creating something really technical, it's nice to kind of take a break and then work on something less technical and then go back and forth. But yeah, it's cool because I really just get to learn. Like, part of the process and the timeline is learning. That's built into our process. And so it gives me an opportunity to really learn a bunch of different things.
So I kind of want to take a shift and kind of talk about the coding workbook, build a website in HTML and CSS. What motivated you, or what was the main purpose for writing it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start really quickly, just in a brief overview of the coding workbook. The coding workbook is really the first of its kind fully offline workbook, which means that kids and teachers and really anyone can learn to build a website fully by hand without a computer, so no computer required. And my motivation for building this was really when I was teaching. I was working at a school where we didn't have the best access to computers, or if we did have computers, they weren't working to the point where we could actually build or run different softwares. And I wanted to make sure that my kids who really did want to learn how to code and who wanted to get this computer science education, I wanted to make sure that they had a way to also learn to code. And so I really set out to figure out with my kids in mind how to create a resource for teachers, students, schools in general who don't have access to computers or internet, to give them what they need to teach and learn a computer science education. And so in education, there's something called the digital divide, and it's the gap of learning between kids who have access to internet and technology versus those who might not have access to internet and technology. And I wanted to create a resource that schools, teachers, anyone could learn the basics of web development with or without access to a computer science or to computers, a computer lab. And I just wanted to make sure that my kiddos weren't falling behind. I mean, computer science, coding, programming, it's becoming so popular, so common. And there's kids that have access when they're in 5th grade or 6th grade to computers and they're taking these after school courses, but then there's students also that don't even have access to computer or internet. And, how do we make sure that we create and support and, help our students make sure that they're just as successful as students who have access? I mean, there's already such a lack of diversity in tech, and I believe working to close the digital divide is one step towards helping bring more diversity into tech.
I like that you were able to provide that by making that resource. I do have a question about that. So, there are online resources, and I like that you provide this as a workbook that you could do offline. Were there any challenges that you faced providing something like a workbook as opposed to like online? Like, how I don't know if there's a huge difference between making and creating the either one. If you want to dive into that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that was probably, just in general, having a coding curriculum that's fully offline was probably the hardest part, because how do you take something that is inherently digital and using technology and making it, offline? And so that's where I came up with this idea of kind of this grid system where, our websites are really just basically a bunch of pixels where you move things around. And so, I realized if kids, they know how to graph, which is essentially a bunch of pixels and you move things around based on coordinates, how do we take a similar concept and how do we teach it in a way where we can, have our kids be moving divs and images and text boxes around, a pen and paper, handwritten, hard copy of a website. And, so that did take some thought and really just iterating on how we would make this work. But eventually, it became possible to where we could give, a student, a margin of, 80 pixels, top and bottom, left and right, and they're able to actually physically move it on the page, just like they would when they're graphing something, to really create a pen and paper version of a website.
Okay, so now going back to the whole being an instructional designer, do you have any advice for anyone who is thinking about switching to this career path? Some things that, whether it's things that you've learned along your journey or just anything additional that they should know?
Yeah, totally. I think the first thing is that for me personally, it was really helpful creating a portfolio of writing projects, screen recordings, just general tutorials. I had that as my blog, but you could create a website, sample projects. If you know how to do something, you can create a simple tutorial, whether it's writing an email or how to cook something or how to build this program, anything. You can create your own sample tutorials and courses. And so I think that was helpful. The second thing is probably networking. I've found that a lot of instructional designers, on LinkedIn have reached out to me if they provide like a personal note about wanting to get into the industry. I'm more than happy to, have a conversation with them. And I think networking is really important because you can share your portfolios and, instructional design, especially digital learning, is becoming really popular these days. And so teams are always looking for instructional designers, which brings me to my third point. I think a tip that I've found in the past few companies that I've worked with, getting some sort of technical experience, whether it's taking a free intro to HTML, a free intro to CSS or web development course, because every company that I've worked at, the one thing we always search for is instructional designers that have some sort of technical experience. Because like I said before, you never know what type of course you're going to build. It could be a technical, it could be a non-technical, and really the unicorns that we're looking for are people that have, even a basic technology background.
Those are some really good tips and advice, especially all of it. Like the networking is a huge thing, I think. But I mean, those were some really good tips. This is a question I asked for everyone on this series. Um, any last words of wisdom for those in these positions, but people in this career path, or any tips for success for women in this field?
Yeah. So for people that are instructional designers, I think the biggest things that have helped me is being open to change, whether that's the structure of the courses you're building, the products that are changing constantly, and having to be able to just kind of go with the ebb and flow of product cycles. Also being open to feedback, because feedback can be sometimes hard to hear, but if it's from the right people, it's only going to make you a better writer and course creator. And then for women in tech, just in general, I think you should always ask for what you're worth when you're negotiating a salary or a raise. I think it's important that, number two, I think it's important that you have a conversation with your manager about your career path and kind of what you need to do to take next steps to the next level. Even if you've only been there for 5, 6 months, it's never too early to kind of plant that seed and know what you need to do to get ahead and increase, your salary, your title, etc. And the third thing, final thing, I think for women in tech is, tech needs more women in general with all sorts of interests. And I think it's so important to not make yourself small and try to fit in. We need women as they are with their diverse set of interests in tech. And so I think being authentic, being yourself is something that is just so powerful.
Thanks for sharing those words of wisdom. Okay, so this is a time where we're going to open up and answer some questions from the audience. I don't see anything now, but I do have some additional questions. Do you come across any challenges as instructional designer, and what are those?
I think the biggest thing that we come across is, working with software. Things are always constantly changing, and it's really hard to stay on top of, product launches and making sure that you're balancing creating your courses with the fast iterations or the updates that kind of come with the, being in tech.
I'm just thinking of other questions. If you had to pick like any soft skills or technical skills that someone should have in this position to be successful, like, what would you choose them? It sounds like kind of educating yourself and keeping up to date with the latest things that are going on. But is there anything else that you can think of as well?
I think, besides keeping up with product stuff, I think just being a good learner in general, because there's always new things that you can be learning. For example, people can use Google Slides, but there's a next level of like people who are really good with Google Slides and create these beautiful presentations, or there's new softwares that, your team might want to try. And so being open and willing to learn new things is always important, because we're always either learning new softwares or best teaching practices, or maybe, someone's discovered a new way to teach or present a concept. And so being always learning and open to learning is super important.
Another question I was thinking of was, what's your design process? Do you have like a storyboard? Do you outline stuff and then fill in the gaps? Like, what is your process of how you come up with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So oftentimes my manager will come and be like, we have this new product coming out and we want to create something for this audience. And then it's up to me to start kind of investigating, basically, where I talk with the product owners, I talk with customer success people about, what are we trying to teach about this product to our customers? What are some pain points that they might be experiencing for those who are already using the product? And kind of just what we call a needs analysis. So we talk and we ask questions to anyone who's really involved with the product. And what do we want the end user or the customer to learn? And once we find out kind of what the learning outcomes are and what we want to teach, then it's up to me to kind of figure out, okay, how are we going to teach these and how do we make sure our end users are successful? And so, yeah, I create an outline. So I'll create maybe, a few lessons that cover big learning objectives, which are, what do we want our end users to learn? And I'll work backwards. So I'll come up with the big, maybe 5 key topics that I want to teach or the big learnings that I want. And then I'll work backwards. What are the terms that people need to know? What are the different skills that people need to know? How do I demonstrate what these things are? And how do I test to make sure that people who are taking our courses are actually learning? Are they learning? Are there things that they need to learn more about? So yeah, I'll create an outline and then we start to fill in the gaps with information, video recordings, definitions, quiz questions, really anything that we in the instructional design industry as best teaching practices think we can do to create courses for our learners.
Got it. I have a question that was sent out. Do you have suggestions for how developers can become better at teaching in their current role? Blogging sounds like one way, but I'm not sure if what I work on overlaps with what people want to learn about.
Yeah, I think one thing that has really helped me is coming at it from a perspective of, you need to remember to put yourself in the learner's shoes. And, as a developer or as someone who's worked with the product for, years, you really know the ins and outs. But if you come at it from a fresh perspective of a user who hasn't ever worked with it, then you can kind of start to break down the basics of what you want them to know. And so if you start with the basics and then you kind of build backwards of what you want them to learn. And while blogging is one way, there's definitely, if you're a developer, I know people often document what they're writing. And I've actually found a few technical writing courses. I think Google has a free one that really helps to teach you how to write in a technical way that's both informative and really clear for the learner. So finding different courses that you can take to kind of teach technical content has been really helpful because there is a difference between teaching technical content and teaching non-technical content. So yeah, I would definitely recommend taking, a course or two. There's definitely free ones out there on how to create technical tutorials, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot more people that need your information than you realize. So if you think that maybe a topic is overdone or, how to build a website is overdone, you probably have a unique perspective and a unique voice and a unique way of teaching something that will help at least, a few people. And I think that's something else to keep in mind.
Let me see if there are any other questions that we had that someone reached out to us. Not right now, but I have also another question. I was thinking there's so many different backup questions because it's just such a new pathway. Like I knew they existed, but I never really thought about it deeply.
Yeah.
And so are there any like tools or apps that help you with your design process, or even just, whether it's creating material or even just getting organized? Is there anything that you use? You're like, yes, this is the thing I use. I live by this. Like for me, I live by like my Google Calendar, but
yeah.
Is there something in particular for you, especially in your career pathway that you like to share?
Yeah, I think definitely my Google Calendar, but I also making sure that I keep everything organized in Google Drive is really important. Some of our products or courses are built with Google Slides. You know, we keep track of things. We just moved to Asana, so we are tracking in that now. So I'm kind of getting a feel for that. But I use, you know, Storyline is a really good, important tool for people to learn if you're an instructional designer. It's kind of like it's a course building software, so that's really important. Also, video editing software and having skills in video editing is really important. So I use Camtasia, but there's a bunch of different video editing softwares because if you're doing a screen recording or you're, you know, recording yourself teaching, you're gonna want to edit it and you're gonna want to like tweak it and like create call outs. And so even for the simplest walkthroughs, you're going to need some sort of video editing software, and you know, being able to be functional with those is really important. And then other tools, I use Illustrator. You know, if we're creating graphics, we can use Illustrator, Figma for wireframing. Yeah, just really as many design tools as possible. Really important.
Are there any certifications that you know of that people could do as well as kind of like a motivator to learn these things, or is it just
I
kind
know,
of, go ahead.
yeah, there's I think there's different extension programs like at UCs that you can get instructional design certificates. I know I think it's ADP, ATP, ADP. One of those two is like a curriculum development instructional design kind of community where you can get certified, you can get resources. I'll email you the right one when after this with the correct information. But yeah, if you look for instructional design certificates, there's courses you can take. I always recommend kind of besides instructional design, learning, you know, a few different technical skills, always important. But yeah, there's definitely certificates out there that you can take.
Awesome. Let me see. So other questions that I've also thought as well, because it's just like, I don't know, for me, I'm just so interested to see what other people are doing and their pathway of getting to there and what are the things that they learned and did. If you could give yourself advice to your past self of like what you, well, I don't want to say what you should have done because that sounds like you read it, but just more like what are some things that would have guided you in the direction you wanted to go, and if you could give like two things to yourself.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first would be seeking out people who are, you know, start by seeking out people who are experienced and really take the time to learn from them. It is kind of a jump when you move from education to tech. There's a lot of you know, just even the basic like terminology, processes, and all of that, which is totally new to someone who doesn't start off in tech. You know, it's a whole new ball game when you get into tech. So I think finding someone that you can ask for help and being totally open and honest. You know, there was, when I first started, there was like a few months where there was an abbreviation or like an acronym for a few things that I just pretended that I knew what they meant for months but I didn't know. And so it was kind of hard for me to do different parts of my role because I didn't know what everyone was talking about and I was too scared to ask. But if I had just asked right away, I think life would have been much easier getting started. So I think that's one. And the second, I think spending more time just being creative in terms of like digital art. I think that was one of the things I really wish I had spent more time doing when I was getting started is, you know, taking some Illustrator classes or taking some design and art classes because you can create so many cool graphics for your courses. But, if you don't have those skills going in, then you have to also spend time learning, which is fine. But, if I had come in with all these skills, that would have been really great.
There's a question, and it kind of is a little bit about your first tip, but what are your thoughts on finding a mentor in this field? Is it important? And also, an additional question is, what if you are just starting out? Like, how would you search for a mentor? If do you have the advice of how you could do that?
I think if you can, if you're just starting out, finding someone who's maybe been in it a bit longer than you, even if it's not someone that's been in it for like 10 years, even if someone's been an instructional designer for, a year or two, really, taking the time to build a relationship with them and ask, hey, are you open to, maybe connecting once a week for 15 minutes to answer any questions? And then coming to those meetings prepared with questions for them to answer is something that I think is really important, because then it shows that you're curious, you're willing to learn, and you're respectful of their time. And so, yeah, just looking throughout your team. I mean, you're probably, if you're an instructional designer, going to be part of some sort of team that, there might be someone you can talk to. If not, I know there's a big community on LinkedIn. Like I said, just reaching out with a genuine message, hey, I want to start out in this career. Can I ask you 2 or 3 questions, even via message, is great. That builds a good relationship. And then, following up with, hey, can we hop on a short Zoom call is another way to do it. Yeah, I mean, I think if you are willing to, be a little bit uncomfortable and reach out and ask, then it pays off big time.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sam. All right. Well, that's our time. That's it for did it today. Thank you again, Sam, for taking the time to meet with all of us and share your experience and perspective. We did leave information on how people can get the coding workbook. But is there any thing you'd like to share about the coding workbook before we end today?
Yeah, just that it's available wherever books are sold, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, nostarchpress.com, which is the publisher. And yeah, we're just really excited to get it into the hands of as many kids as possible so that, really anyone can learn to code.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone who attended our event on Shout Out Saturdays. Samana, do you mind sharing your screen again? Awesome. And we'll start on slide 6. Perfect. Okay. So a summary of this interview is planned to be posted on our chapter blog. Follow us on our Medium blog to get update on our recent posts. And please, if you haven't done so already, please join our community with the Linktree link displayed over there. You can view our future events, our past event recordings, our blog, our Slack channel, and you could follow our social media platforms as well. And just a reminder, the concept of Shout Out Saturday series was promoting women professionals who want to share their insight into the tech world through overcoming obstacles, highlighting accomplishments, or any tech industry advice. So if you really enjoyed the session and would like to share your career journey or know someone who would be a good fit, please reach out to us and let us know, and just email us at the email there that we have, sv@womenwhocode.com, with the subject line Shout Out Saturday application. Well, all right. Thanks again to everyone and have a great weekend. And thank you again, Sam, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.